I'm Doug Boles, and this is The Skinny.
From the Fatheads Eyewear Studios in Speedway, Indiana, this is The Skinny, brought to you by Toyota, Rhino Classifieds, General Tire, and Dream Giveaway. This segment of The Skinny is brought to you by Toyota. Welcome to The Skinny. We're here in Speedway, Indiana, just about 5 minutes or so from the racetrack. Sitting alongside is Mr. Michael Young, better known as the track dude in his world. Great to have you with us, my friend. Looks like you've been hard on the coffee this morning.
Been very busy drinking coffee. I'm my 8th espresso, so if I get a little jittery, you'll know why.
We have a very special guest with us here this morning. It's a name that if you live in the Indianapolis area, you're certainly very familiar with. The rest of the country, maybe a little bit here and there, and worldwide, probably not so much. However, the place that he runs is certainly second to none. It's one of the most prestigious venues in all the land. He's an extremely busy guy. His name is Doug Boles. He is the president of the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. Trust me, he is a very busy man. So to get him in here, despite him working about 5 minutes down the road, is quite an honor, quite a pleasure. Thank you very much, sir.
Yeah, Ken, thanks for having me. And I wouldn't argue it is the best facility in the world that I get to be president over. It's an amazing place, and they keep me busy though. I don't control my own schedule, which is kind of crazy. And they just point me in a direction. And I had a hard time leaving though. I walked out of the racetrack here to come here, and you're right, it is 5 minutes or less away. And with Indy cars testing today, and you get to hear the noise of those Indy cars, it's hard to leave the speedway even if I need to.
Can you tell us who's testing?
Jimmy Johnson and Romain Grosjean, which is pretty cool because both those guys ran the NTT IndyCar Series the whole season except for the ovals. Grosjean ran one of them. Neither ran the Indy 500, but both fell in love with the Indy 500 as they were working through the NTT IndyCar Series, and I think it's they want to get it on their schedule in 2022. So this is a rookie orientation program, which is crazy for those two to have to go through a rookie program, but exciting times to have both of them on track today trying to work through that ROP program.
I think it speaks volumes, too, of the level of safety that's required to compete out there, despite the level of drivers that both of those guys are. When you get out there on that track and you're going in excess of 220 miles an hour, it becomes very narrow. I mean, it does not take much of a flinch for things to go wrong.
Yeah, absolutely. It is very precise the way those drivers have to get through there, getting those cars set up to worry about those tenths of a second that really are the difference between qualifying on the front row and maybe not even making the show anymore. So we have more than 33 cars typically now are trying to run the Indy 500. So it'll be interesting to hear the feedback at lunchtime from both of those drivers, from having watched it on the outside, understanding the cars quite a bit, but now getting an opportunity to get in it. And it does. The faster you go, the narrower and narrower it gets. And that turn one, you can't see all the way through. So you're hoping you're going to make it through the other side. So I really can't wait to hear what they say about that test. It's
interesting. On the simulator, I've driven the track many, many times, and turn one is the one that I always struggle with. Everything else I'm okay. And it's interesting that you say that that driver's perspective. I've also sat on the outside of turn one when we were first looking at a house to move here, and it was carb day. And I remember the very first time I saw cars coming down that straightaway at speed, near 230 miles an hour, and thinking to myself, there is absolutely no way on God's green earth that guy's going to make a left-hand turn here in a minute. And I was just convinced he was coming through the fence, and it was the most exhilarating thing.
It says an awful lot about the technology of the Dallara car and certainly the Firestone tire to be able to handle that grip, the G-forces, and get them through there. And the pole speed was 232-ish miles an hour, which means they're closing in on 240 miles an hour going into turn one and turn three in qualifying trim. And they still don't lift, and the cars make it out the other side. It's pretty impressive.
It is unbelievable.
You've seen changes since your tenure as president of the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, most recently with Roger Penske taking over as the owner of the Indianapolis Motor Speedway and IndyCar. So many great changes. Do you have favorites of your tenure there, the things that have happened between jumbotrons, moving everything over and timing and scoring? People have so much information at their fingertips, and apps now with tickets. There's so many various things that have changed. Do you have a certain favorite that sticks out to you?
Well, the technology certainly has changed an awful lot. I started in November 2010 at the Speedway. I've been in the sport since the middle 90s, so I've seen a ton of change. Maybe the biggest change that's been the most helpful, but also can sometimes be the most frustrating, and you guys know this, is the ability to connect to a fan through social media, whether it's Twitter or Instagram or Facebook. There's so many ways to get real-time information to a fan and to give them sort of the behind-the-scenes look that you couldn't give before. So that tool as a way to communicate with customers and and with fans has been something I think is probably the change that I like the most. It also becomes the most difficult when something's going wrong or somebody has an opinion that is different than maybe a decision we've made. Certainly, we saw it in the Verizon 200 when the curbs came up. You saw both sides of it. Of hey, this is the track's fault. Hey, this isn't the track's fault. And you hear those complaints and see those. So it's a great tool to communicate. It also can be a frustrating tool when you have to deal with some communications that are a little difficult. In terms of physical changes there, I think the one I'm most excited about, and maybe isn't the most glamorous, but for those folks that sit on the front stretch of the Speedway or Turn 1, when Roger bought the Speedway, allowing us to move our perimeter on the west side of the facility out to about the middle of what used to be the 4 lanes of Georgetown Road, has allowed for fans to go north and south on the backside, especially on race day of the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, in a much smoother way. Used to be so many people would come in gate 1 and then it would constrict where we put the new elevators up in 2016. And as you got further north down Georgetown Road inside the fence, there literally was only about a foot between the fence and the west side of the elevator banks. So we created this bottleneck, which could get pretty scary at some points in time as people were trying to work their way through. So for me, that's the big change that I think makes the biggest difference and the one that makes the experience for the customers so much better.
People have so many traditions at the Speedway, and I know that this had to have been an issue, that I sat with my father at the 1956 Indianapolis 500 underneath this tree, and now the tree's not there. I noticed it for the first time this year. There have been a lot of trees that have been removed, but the sight lines of what used to be a very small part of that track that you can see, especially on race day where my vantage point is in turn 2, I can see almost the entire track.
It's true, and I'm a huge tree guy. So when Roger bought the Speedway, and one of the biggest things for him is wanting to make sure that the ability for a customer to see as much of the racetrack as possible. You can't see all the way around the Speedway. It was not designed that way. It's not like a Texas or a Charlotte or some of these tracks that are down in a bowl and you can see the whole mile and a half. But there were trees and other obstacles that were in the way, making it difficult. So what we did was we sat in each of the seats or stood in each of the locations and said, okay, we need to remove this to give the customer's experience or make the customer's experience better. Good news is Roger's planted back a lot of trees based on the ones we've taken out. So we've certainly planted more than we've removed. But removing some of those was definitely bittersweet, I guess you'd say. In fact, one of the trees that we removed, I actually kept 2 10-foot sections of the trunk, and the trunk was 5 or 6 feet around because I felt like, to me, there was so much history in that tree, and I was certain that the tree had probably seen every day of the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. So I paid several $1,000s to have these huge pieces of the tree hauled away. Turns out the tree is 138 years old, seen every day of the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, was on the farm there when Carl Fisher and the team bought it. There's just so much history there. I'm trying to figure out now what do I do with them. But we've been planting those trees back. We're planting them more strategically so that they aren't in the way of the ability for a customer to see absolutely as much of the racing as possible from their seats.
Do you feel like, speaking of the social media, do you feel like that end of the business has expanded enough to create its own department?
Well, certainly, companies are going to where they have somebody that's really thinking about social media. We have that both on the IMS side and the IndyCar side. It's also probably the place where we could do a whole lot better because it is so instantaneous. There are so many people engaged in it. It's a challenge for us to continue to make it better, more responsive.
It's so time consuming.
It is time consuming, but you are talking to your customer, and the most important thing we have is our customer. The Indianapolis 500 doesn't get to have 106 runnings next May without those customers. And I call 10 customers every night just to say thanks because we don't get to have a 500 without those customers. And social media is the same way, and it is time consuming, and that's why I do think you need somebody dedicated to it. I try to communicate as much as I can, and one thing I've refused to do at this point is, a lot of organizations, the folks that are sort of on the front end of it, have somebody else responding to and being their social media, writing it for them. I do it all myself because I want to make sure that I'm able to stay connected, but it is time consuming. I hear it at home from Beth, from my wife. She's like, get off your phone. And I'm like, I got to connect with the customers. And she's right. At some level, you do have to step away because it is time consuming. And you could spend 24 hours a day just scrolling and responding and when people tag you. But I do think it's important. The only time during the year when I'm not responsible for it myself is on race day, and I don't let people respond on my platform, but people monitor it so that if there's an issue that comes up at the track and somebody's tagged me and not IMS, that we can make sure that we're responding to those. And but it is very time consuming. But at the end of the day, it is the most direct way that we can communicate with our customer real time. We need to make sure we're doing it.
I said this to you at Rev, and I'm going to follow it up and say it here again. The most common thing I hear about Doug Boles is his interaction with the fans on the facility. I mean, never mind social media. It's very cool to hear that you're still handling all that yourself, because so many people, like you say, do have somebody else do it for them. But I said it at Rev, and I constantly hear you talk about that bottleneck. I remember that bottleneck a couple of years ago, but I would also hear Doug Boles picked us up on a golf cart and gave us a ride, somewhere. So your interaction with the fans is very well known.
Well, for me, my job is to help make the fans' experience better, and you can't make it better unless you're out doing it with them. So I'm not in the suites. I'm not in the pagoda unless I'm on the second floor, which is our ops floor, and just kind of making sure everything's going okay. I try and be in the grandstands, talking to the fans, walking through the experience, understand what's going on. For the Indy 500 this year, we were challenged with our concession stands. We heard it through social media, but had I not walked through and seen how big those concession stand lines were and how we're servicing people, you really don't understand the impact. And when you walk around the corner, you go, oh my gosh, that person at the back of that line, they're going to miss half the race if we can't figure out how to expedite selling them their concessions so they can get back to their seats. But those are the things that you really don't understand unless you're really out there doing it. I had a couple experiences this year. I got a text from somebody that said, hey, we've had a person fall. We think maybe a heart attack in the grandstands. I was actually out, so I actually got to get out there and make sure that our team was servicing those folks, talk to the family and the people around them to understand what had happened and to be able to follow up. You can't do that sitting in a suite. You can't do that if you're sitting in your office. So for me, it's all about interacting with the fans, and I'm a fan. So for me, I'd rather be in the grandstands watching racing. So this year I did take my Speedway hat off for a moment. So my stepson is Connor Daly, and he led the Indy 500 for the first time this year, which was actually really, really cool to have happen. And I was out wandering around when he took the lead for the second time. And I said to a couple of the folks who helped me take notes as we're wandering around, I said, "Look, I got to go find Beth and sit with Beth." So I went up into the grandstands where Beth was, sat with Beth, and hung out there for a little bit when Connor was leading that second time around, and just let myself enjoy the fact that I was a fan. And my stepson was leading the Indianapolis 500, but more importantly, to watch how proud his mom was to sit there and watch Connor lead the 500. So I did take that hat off for a moment, and then I was actually on the backside of Penthouse talking to some customers when the tire hit his car, so I didn't see it. I knew a yellow had happened, and I walked up and was able to at least see that he was still running. And so those were my two sort of take the president hat off moments and be a fan for a second.
We'll see if we can get permission from him to show you that in some video. I've known Connor since he was a young carter out at Newcastle. So, and yes, I think one of the highest punted tires in the history of motorsports. It was quite the moment. We're going to take a quick break here, and we'll be right back with the president of the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, Mr. Doug Boles. This segment of The Skinny is brought to you by Dream Giveaway. Dream Giveaway has been giving away high-end American muscle cars to raise money for charity since 2007. Dream Giveaway is known for giving away classic and new muscle and paying the federal taxes so the winners don't have to. For $25, you can jump in the game, and part of that goes to charity. You'll have a chance at winning some of the coolest cars on the planet. Check it out at dreamgiveaway.com. Welcome back to The Skinny. We have the president of the Indianapolis Motor Speedway with us here today, Mr. Doug Boles. Of course, Michael Young sitting alongside the track dude. Great to have him as a co-host as well. So much history out there. Has covered the IndyCar series for so many years, so a lot in common there. But I want to go back in time here a little bit, even before Michael Young, believe it or not. Boles grew up in Danville, Indiana, and for the fans at home, I mean, we're talking about 20 minutes away or so, making 3x5 index cards of the 500 qualifiers at the kitchen table, moving them to the dining room table for second round of qualifying as he longed to attend the race. he couldn't. His father said until he was 10 years old.
It's 100% true. My dad was the United States Auto Club yearbook editor in the early 60s, so he loved motorsport, loved the Indy 500. And so I grew up in a house where that's all we talked about. But in his mind, you needed to be 10 years old before you could attend the Indy 500. And we'd been to practice days, but we didn't go to qualifying. What our tradition was, we sat at the kitchen table, listened on the radio network, and we got 3x5 cards out. So you figure out, you get your star out, and you went through the lineup, and you wrote everybody down and knew they were coming, and we would write lap 1, 2, 3, 4, and then the average of them. And then if they waved off, we'd write wave off, and we created our own grid. Back then, it was 2 weekends, right? So you get through Saturday and Sunday, and then Mom would be like, "Okay, you've had the kitchen table for 2 days. You got to get it moving." And we had a little dining room off to the side, so then we'd move all of them, and then they'd sit there the whole week. And then the next weekend, we'd bring them back, and we'd have our bump cars, and so it was just a really cool way for Dad and I to interact and to listen on the radio. And as I got older as a kid, you get a stopwatch and you'd listen to the sound on the radio and try and guess how fast they were going. Oh, that was a good one. So it was an awful lot of fun. And then when I was 10, I turned 10 in 1976, and I'd argued to my dad that, well, look, I'm closer to 10 in May of 1976 than I'll be in 1977. In 1977, I'm really close to 11. You really penalized me and said, no, you have to be 10. And I was Dad
standing firm on that deal, and the lawyer coming out at you. Hey, let me start arguing this now.
And he's a lawyer and a judge, so I was going to lose that battle. And then when I got a chance to go, I was a huge A.J. Foyt fan. I mean, A.J. is other than my dad, my all-time hero, and it kind of worked out well because my first Indy 500 ends up being A.J. Foyt's fourth Indy 500. And I never really was a big Johnny Rutherford or Bobby Unser fan, and they were winning those years right before AJ won the fourth one anyway. And I love both those guys now, but back then, if you're an AJ Foyt fan, you can't like an Unser, you can't like an Andretti. JR you could maybe, right, but the Unsers and the Andrettis you certainly couldn't. So it was pretty neat to be able to have my first Indy 500 with my dad. And have AJ Foyt win his fourth 500 is a really special moment. In fact, if you were to say, okay, list your top 5 Indy 500 moments, that would certainly be one of the top 5.
What was the most pivotal thing on your road to becoming president? Because I think a lot of people forget you co-owned Panther Racing for a time, so you dabbled in that side of things. Was that a help, a hindrance? What really helped you grow to become a player in this role that you're in now?
Well, I think the team side certainly helped. To be able to understand what teams want and when you make decisions, how they impact teams, because it may not seem like it, but different things, especially on the IndyCar side, as you make a rule change and what's that do for a team. Honestly, I can't tell you. I can tell you there are a handful of people that really were instrumental in getting me to this point. So Terry Lingner, one of them, who was an amazing mentor, still is for me, and just an amazing person who loves the sport. Jeff Belskis and Mark Dill interviewing me and giving me a chance to come work at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, and then ultimately it was Mark Miles that put me in the position I'm in today. So a whole lot of people have been there. I just think for me probably is a lot of my passion for the Speedway, my passion for the fan side of things, my understanding of running a business from having run Panther Racing and working there. I think there's a whole lot of things, but it's still one I'm unsure of exactly. It's a God thing, right? I don't know how else to explain it because I certainly didn't do it myself.
So as a 10-year-old boy, what did you want to be?
Man, I'll tell you what. Well, I thought you were going to go another direction with that question because there's so many times I'll do something and I'll call Beth at home or I'll say something to somebody. Man, I wish I could call that 10-year-old who's waiting to go to his Indianapolis 500 and say, "Hey, dude, you just wait. Yeah? Just wait. Some of the experiences and the things that you'll get to do." You wouldn't believe as a 10-year-old, right? It would just be really cool to go back to those days as that 10-year-old and just know that this was coming and just be able to stay passionate about it and work and kind of work through it. But as a 10-year-old, I don't know exactly at that point in time if I knew what I wanted to do. I think I knew I wanted to go to law school, but that wasn't because I wanted to. It was just because my dad had been there and all his friends, so you didn't know much else. Ended up at Butler as a journalism student because at that point in time I thought I'm never going to race a car. I'm never going to be A.J. Foyt, but I can write about it.
But that passion was still there.
So the passion was there, and I really chose Butler for 2 reasons. One, I was a swimmer, and I got a scholarship to swim there, which was awesome. And the other one was I knew that it was close enough to the Speedway anytime they were tire testing. And as you know, back in the day, they tire tested all the time, right? I could just drive over because you could hear it. So you could get up in the morning, go over, and in fact, I wrote many journalism papers sitting in the museum parking lot. I had an Oldsmobile, a 1978 Oldsmobile SX was the car I had. It had a sunroof, and I pulled the sunroof out, and I had this little typewriter thing that had like an LCD screen in it. It would store like 120 words at a time before you had to print it out, so you could sort of half write, and just you hear cars, and I go sit in the museum parking lot and write and hang around the Speedway.
Michael and I have had this discussion a number of times, and say on an opening day of the 500, he's getting ready to work. I've had the pleasure of standing at both the top of turns 1 and turns 3 as a spotter on the catwalk, and I try to tell people, I try to put into words what it's like, the pageantry and the energy and the feeling of it, but I can never get it done. Can you?
No, it's not possible, and I tell people that have never been. I can give you all the anecdotes and explain all the history, but until you walk through that gate or drive through that tunnel, you can't explain it. And whether it's a practice day or a race day, or some of my favorite moments are when no one else is around the Speedway and it's dark, and I'll walk out of my office and walk around the racetrack in the dark. It's the history. The place is alive. I mean, I don't know how else to describe it. It is this living building, track, grandstands. When you start thinking about all the history that was made there and the people who have given everything just to make the race, let alone win that place at that place, it is magical. And then race day, when the gates open and the people start rolling in, and you talked earlier about the traditions and how important those traditions are, there's a whole bunch of things we can all agree to are so central to the DNA of the Speedway, and especially the Indy 500, you can never change. 500 miles, 33 cars, yard of bricks, bottle of milk, all of those things. But then each family, each person that comes in has their own traditions that are built in and around that, where they park, what they put in their cooler, who they go with, when they pass tickets out to folks, what seat they sit in. It's just an amazing place, and 70% of those people that come on race day don't watch another race the rest of the year. Their race experience all year is the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, and I wrote a little white paper for Roger and Mark recently on what makes the Indianapolis 500 the Indianapolis 500, and in it I'm trying to argue that it's not the race. It's an event, and it's an experience, and it's all these things that my dad brought me the first time. A lot of people's grandparents or a fraternity brother, an older brother, or they listened to it on the radio and couldn't wait to get there. There's so many things that make it a destination and an event. It's not a race. We're not the Daytona 500. That's an unbelievable race. The Indianapolis 500 is an unbelievable event.
Unbelievable. Yeah, I agree. And just let me follow up here real quick, Michael, because as a spotter myself, and maybe I shouldn't give this up to the president of the Speedway, but the family of spotters that are up in the catwalk is a unique mix, of course, as you try to help other teams win, but then we work together and then we battle with each other. But we've made plans to hang around after the race is over, bring up a cigar, bring up a little sifter and a Dixie cup, and after you stand there and you battle for 3.5 hours, hoping to win the most prestigious race on the planet, in my humble opinion, and then just sit down and let the fans go out, and pretty soon it's just us sitting there and smoke a cigar and look out over that place. It is just, I love what you just said. I've never heard it put that way, but the place is alive. Those are great words right there. It's a great description, the best one I've heard so far, and of course it's magical. It's such a feeling. It is unbelievable.
Yep, it is. And I've had an opportunity to spot for Roberto Guerrero and Sam Hornish and Townsend Bell, and the spotter group is an amazing family, like you said. And it's interesting, the spotter gets a little bit of recognition on television now because it is such an important piece. But it's one of those things that I wish that people could really see and understand the pressure that goes along with that too, because you are the eyes for a driver who has a mirror that's about this big on either side, and they have some idea what's going on, but they don't really know exactly what's going on. And you're out lobbying with the guy who's a lap down in front of you, and you need to get him to move, and you're working to get it's amazing, all the network of how that works. And it's interesting how you described it too. You are working with each other, but you're also competing against each other, and there's those friendships and battles and scuffles that even happen in the spotter stand, right, when you're trying to get somebody out of your way.
Yeah.
It's the race is so complex, but even for the spotter side, the traditions you guys have of where you stand, who you stand with, who you stand with, and the way you the way
It's
you
very regimented now that
for
you
sure,
put it
and
that way.
the things you say when you first communicate to
and
the
it's
driver
even
that you had.
respected by the other guys. It's like, no, he stands here.
Right.
It's
It's really one of those pieces that would be a fun story sometime. It's sort of follow a spotter for the month. And
I tried to explain to a couple of people, just a small segment, but I'm spotting for Dixon, and it's a practice day. And the worst part, of course, is them coming out. I'm in turn 3 and coming off pit road and blending up. And Scott, of course, is I don't know that he needs a spotter. He's just absolutely magical. But their lack of vision in those cars in terms of looking behind them is very, very limited, as you say. But I remember watching him, and he's on the throttle. He's coming hard into turn 3. And I said, you've got 3 cars. I said, there's a small gap. I said, between the first one and the next 2, then they're nose to tail. Then you have a small gap, and the next car is coming. And he's very good about bailing out the last second. He'll just take the runoff in turn 3 if he thinks it's dangerous. But I remember talking to him. I said, there's the first one. I said, 2 more coming, nose to tail, 2 more coming. First one, second one, right there. And he went left, right, boom, up into the lane and turned left. And I was like, oh, my God. He's listening to me for starters. I mean, I was scared to death. I was like, holy shit, he just put all of his faith inside of me.
Yep.
And I was in complete control of what he was doing right there. And I'm like, that's Scott Dixon listening to me. I'm like, oh, man, I mean, and it is. The pressure is like, whoo, man, I mean, it's thick, dude.
And I don't think people understand that. And you can say all you want, hey, I'm not driving the car, but at the end of the day, you're sort of driving the car. I mean, they are relying on you, and that's a perfect story to show that. And there is pressure that, at what tone of voice do you use? How urgent are you? How calm are you on the radio? What information do they want, and when do they want it? Because at 230 miles an hour, they're going 400 feet a second or some crazy amount, right? And that can change so fast. And especially when you're in turn 3, you watch them come out of turn 2. It's a mile away from where you're standing, and you have to figure out the closing rate of the guy coming out behind him to tell him what's happening. It's not an easy job.
And you got to pick out the color of the car, which is always interesting as well, especially when it was like Connor's car that was black. All right, we'll take a quick break here one more time. We'll be right back on the other side.
This segment of The Skinny has been brought to you by General Tire. It's more than just a slogan. Anywhere is possible with General Tire. General Tire's Grabber X3 Mud Terrain Tire offers aggressive styling and is engineered for durability with innovative performance features that are ready to carry you through extreme mud, dirt, and rock-covered terrain. For extreme traction that's ready for anything and rugged styling to match, look no further than the Grabber X3. Make your anywhere possible by visiting GeneralTire.com today.
This segment of The Skinny is brought to you by Rhino Classifieds. Tired of all those ads and random stuff that shows up when you're looking to buy or sell your car parts? Rhino Classifieds was created just for you. Welcome to a streamlined buying and selling app created by racers for racers and race fans. Modified cars, classic cars, race cars, that special big block you need, the trailer to move your baby around the country in. We got you at rhino.co. And we're back here once again in Speedway, Indiana, just about 5 minutes from the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, with none other than the president of the Indianapolis Motor Speedway sitting alongside Mr. Doug Boles. Appreciate him taking the time to come in here and chat with us. And one thing you'll learn about listening to the show is he is a people's people. He definitely loves to interact with everybody at the Speedway. And we talked about you as a young man not being able to go to the track until you were 10 years old. Now we fast forward that connection you have with your father. Now you have with your son, Carter. I've also read where you've spent some time up on the top of the pagoda, which is absolutely magical. But to sit up there during the silence of that racetrack with your son, or even during racing, of course, it has to be something special.
Yeah, when I first started at the Speedway, so 10 years ago, Carter was 8, 9 years old, and we got a tradition that at the end of every race day, when things had cleared out and things had settled down for me, he and I would go sit up on the pagoda roof and just chat. And I wanted to hear about his day. I wanted to hear, what did a 9-year-old, a 10-year-old, an 11-year-old, a 12-year-old think about the Indy 500, the Brickyard 400, the activities that were going on, and what was interesting in him. He's always sort of been a big race fan, and for me, it was a moment that you take your kid to a place that very few people get to go, and nobody's up there but the two of you, and you've got this massive, unbelievably magical facility around you, and to hear the innocence of a child tell you what the day was like and who he was excited for and why he thought this was good and why that was bad or why did that guy make that movie, and it was a pretty neat period in time. The last few years, as he's gotten older, he's been more interested in, after the 500 going down, making sure Connor was okay, right, and some of the other things. So we haven't done that in the last few years, but for me, that was an end-of-the-day tradition that was pretty special for me. Probably meant more to me than him. I don't think he understood why I did that, but there's nothing like the top of the pagoda, sunsets, sunrises. For a period of time, we did a big charity thing where we auctioned off an opportunity to watch the sunrise on Indy 500 race morning with 4 people, and I put a bottle of champagne up there, and
so awesome.
and it went to support type 1 diabetes, which is something that Connor was really cared about, and you raised $25,000 for a charity for 4 people to come up and watch the sun come up over the Indianapolis Motor Speedway on race day. It's magical that morning. But anytime that you can get up there, if I'm around late enough at night and there's no one around and the sun's about to go down, I'll call Beth and say, I'm going to be a little late coming home because I'm going to go watch the sun go down. And Indiana's flat, but the sunsets from up there are pretty magical. And when I'm up there, I usually try and post it so that fans can enjoy it as well.
You have a great point. Talking about your son, my son has been involved with racing. I think he's seen more 500s at his age than I had seen when I was his age and coming up. They're race fans. I love what has happened with the snake pit, the EDM, the ability to bring kids in, even though they may have no idea what's going on. The biggest challenge I see for the Speedway is the relevance of the automobile and the fact that kids, some of them don't even get their driver's license.
It's an appliance.
Yeah, exactly. How often is this talked about, and what do you see the future of the race becoming with a generation of kids that really have no, or what I feel, no interest in the car? And I know it's an event, but it's still based around the cars.
So, for sure. I mean, you think about when the 3 of us grew up, our buddies on the weekends, we were working on our cars. You went cruising in your cars. And, it was all about, everything was sort of centered around the freedom that the car brought. And now the freedom comes through their cell phone device or something. And so the car is something that they don't view as anything other than a means to get from one place to the other. And some people, don't even get those driver's licenses until it's amazing. Carter's a freshman at Purdue, and some of his friends don't have driver's licenses, and they're in college, right? It makes no sense. Well, 2 things. I think the snake pit's really important. And while it's offensive to people in some ways that remember the real first snake pit, and they're like, "This isn't the snake pit. The snake pit was this one experience inside turn 1, and it was a little bit more. It was organic on its own, and it had a lot more interesting experiences, and certainly captivated a lot of people. But somehow, people that started there ended up going, this is what I do on Memorial Day Sunday. This is what I do race weekend. And then they bought tickets and they sit in the grandstands and they became race fans. So the current snake pit is music driven. It gives us an opportunity when we go on a college campus. If we went on a college campus and just said, hey, come to the Indy 500, people walk right past those, no matter how good looking the girls are, whatever you're doing right there to try and sell, to get to interact with somebody, just doesn't happen. The music, they stop and they want to come see the music. So we capture them. We know who they are. We know how to contact them. And what we want them to ultimately do is go, you know what? I'm a little older now. I don't need to be down. Or maybe I just want to go see one of the bands, but I'm going to sit in the grandstands. So we have to figure out how to transition them. So that really is important. And then the automobile is the other one. The thing that I think works on the automobile right now, and we have to do a better job of telling the story, is the technology. It's not really about the automobile, but it's about the fact that the automobile has all this technology on it. NTT has been a great partner in trying to figure out how do you take some of that technology off the cars, put it up on that big board on the back of the pagoda. Now figure out a way to get it in somebody's hands so they see the technology that's in those cars and connect it to sort of that technology geek fan versus the automotive geek fan. So those are the 2 places I think we have the best chance of bringing young folks in outside of my dad brought me here and this is what we do. Right. This is our family thing. And that's always, I think, going to be the best way to bring somebody along. But to capture those people that don't have that experience, you got to do it through the music or you have to do it through that technology connection that the car brings.
It's good to be buddies with Doug Boles.
Oh, yes.
He took his buddies with a 6-pack of beer to the Yard of Bricks and enjoyed some beverages. How cool is that?
Yeah.
So just to preference it, I mean, we're talking about the president of the Indianapolis Motor Speedway who dresses like this on a daily basis. I mean, very professional. And you just don't expect to, I mean, I know you interact with the people, but you're the president and you have this presence about you. But to grab a six-pack and your buddies and to go sit down on the yard of bricks and have a beer.
I think the point is, I think first and foremost, you're the president, but a close second is you're a race fan. And I can't imagine. Did you wake up every morning and say, I can't believe.
Every single day. It's every single day. I drive in the speedway, and like I said earlier, I the things I get to do, and I think, oh my gosh, that 10-year-old who walked through gate 1 with his dad for the first time, holding his dad's hand, just so excited to be there, would just be totally blown away. But I wear a tie because when they made me president, I said the brand deserves it. Carl Fisher wore a tie, Tony Holman wore a tie, Eddie Rickenbacker wore a tie. It's not because I want to wear a tie, but I want to show people that I respect what the Indianapolis Motor Speedway and the Indy 500 is so much. I'll put a tie on every day. I don't care how hot it is. I don't care if it's a weekend. I'm going to wear a tie when I'm representing the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. Would I rather be in my T-shirt and a pair of jeans? 100%. So for me, this is all about showing the respect for the facility. I got some feedback from a fan at one point in time said, well, you shouldn't have to show it. Shouldn't have to be about a tie. And it's not about a tie. It's just my one way of saying the Indianapolis Motor Speedway is so important. And every day I get a chance to go there, I'm going to remind myself it's that important by putting this stupid thing around my neck.
You know, I mean, I couldn't agree with you more. And maybe it's because we're old school and we kind of come out of that era. I think the NFL could learn a lot from you. I remember looking at Tom Landry standing on the sidelines all the time, dressed to the T's, man.
Yep.
And now you look at a Belichick, and he's got on a sloppy cut-off T-shirt that drives me crazy. I know things are changing, but
and that's okay for him, right? I mean, for other, so the next president may not do this, and I'm 100%. But this is my way of doing that. In terms of my buddies, we spent so much time loving the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, and I probably loved it more than any of my buddies, and drug them along, and they find and when I have an opportunity to say, like, I got a buddy named Chris Wilkes, who a huge race fan. I said, hey, and he works on the north or southwest side of Indianapolis. And one night I said, hey, let's go grab some beer. And he said, great. I said, I got a little surprise for you. So grab beer, grab a six-pack, took the tie off, sat on the yard of bricks and drank beer and just talked about how cool it is that I get to come here. I have a key to this place. There's nobody else here but me and you, and we're drinking beer on the yard of bricks. It's pretty cool.
That's pretty cool.
Rank Elio Castroneves' win this past year.
Just got chills.
And how magical that was. I left my position in turn 2, and I stayed up there for about 10 minutes after the race. And as I walked back, I said, my gosh, the fans are still here. It was so magical.
So AJ, Al, and Rick are magical people in our history and always will be. And I didn't think you'd ever see a 4-time winner. And when Elio left Penske, you thought, okay, he's done. Now we got to start all over again. We don't really have you. Sato is a 2-time winner, but you don't have anybody else running, full time right now that's got more than 1 win. So I don't think we're going to ever see that in our lifetime. And Dixon, who should probably be a 10-time winner, right, is only a 1-time winner, and he's running out of time. To have Elio win was amazing. As a promoter, it's awesome to have a younger 4-time winner that you continue to promote. But what made it special is the way he made it special, the way he celebrated, the way he interacted with the fans, his sprint up the front stretch and back, just the whole. I thought when he ran, I thought he's going to run all the way around, and then he got down there and probably went, oh crap, it's not a 38-second run. He's so used to getting around so quick. It's a long way when you're trying to do it on foot. But we did something really cool. I haven't talked to anybody about this. We got the 4-time winners together and did a little roundtable that at some point in time we're gonna share with our fans the 4 Indy 500 winners together in the same room talking about what it was like to be a 4-time winner, but more importantly to welcome Elio to the club. And I can't wait for us to figure out how we're going to use that content at some point in time, because to have those 4 guys. In fact, I wanted to do it on race day, and by the time it finally hit me, and I called a buddy of mine who was helping manage Al Sr., I said, hey, where's Al? His plane just left. So at that point in time, even a photo of the 4 of them in the same place couldn't happen. So trying to get 2 80-plus-year-old guys, a 60-plus-year-old guy, and the Elio together at the same time was a challenge, but we got it done, and I can't wait to share that at some point in time.
So look forward to that as we continue on here. Thank you very much. I know you're super busy, man, and for you to find the time to come over here and spend with us, man, I can't thank you enough for it. Mike, thanks as always, man. You bring so much to the table. for the fans at home, if you get an opportunity, I promise you it's a bucket list item. You've got to make your way to the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. If you can get there for the 500, that's as good as it gets. But if you can get there at any time for any reason, even if you just come to town and you take the tour, I promise you it will not disappoint. Hope you enjoyed the show here. Doug Boles, president of Indianapolis Motor Speedway, and now you know the skinny behind the Speedway. Thanks for being with us here on The Skinny. This episode has been brought to you by Toyota, Rhino Classifieds, Dream Giveaway, and General Tire. For the latest in sunglasses, optical frames, accessories, and apparel, be sure to check out fatheads.com. That's Fatheads with a Z. Production facilities provided by Fatheads Eyewear Studios. All rights reserved.